Hi everyone, I'm Jack the Rambling Raconteur and I hope that you're doing well. I'd like to share a few thoughts on John Ashbery's debut collection, Some Trees, published in 1956 when he was in his later 20s. It's a great debut collection, in part because it points to the many divergent directions that Ashbery would go on to throughout his career, and that he possessed that searching and that yearning for a poetic form or sensibility or sensation of language that he wanted to examine and explore right from the beginning of his career. For the next 50 years, he would go on, he would write book-length poems like Flowchart. He would write Pulitzer Prize winner. he would examine so many different ways to look at our world, to look at human emotions through poetry. And I want to just read a couple of examples that get at how he was constantly questing, the ways in which here at the very beginning, he was playing with ideas within poetry. So I'll start with Some Trees itself. One that was, I think is probably a fairly accessible poem from the collection. Some trees. These are amazing, each, joining a neighbor as though speech were a still performance, arranging by chance. To meet as far as this morning, from the world as agreeing. With it, you and I are suddenly what the trees try to tell us we are, that their merely being there means something that soon we may touch, love, explain. And glad not to have invented such comeliness we are surrounded, a silence already filled with noises, a canvas on which emerges a chorus of smiles, a winter morning, placed in a puzzling light and moving, our days put on such reticence, these accents seem their own defense. And there is a rhyme within this poem. It's something that could have been conjured up from generations earlier, from the 19th century in many ways, or even earlier than that. There's a pastoral sensibility of finding the truth of humanity expressed in nature. And so he has this very traditional poem, but there's a sense of irony contained within the collection, surrounded by other poems about modern sensibilities, about the way technologies are changing, and a steamboat for entertainment. A pastoral poem seems somehow to take on this new context, and the way he looks and explores the humanity within the trees, the way that they are somehow prefiguring human interactions, human conversations, human withdrawals. And so I think once again, it really is a poem that, while accessible, pushes us to view the world through his eye, to view our own interactions and see the trees mirrored in them, but also to view the trees and the interactions that they're mirroring. So I think that is really something that he accomplishes quite well. This second poem, I'm just going to read and see if, as I read it, you can spot what Ashbery is doing. This is called Pantom. Eyes shining without mystery, footprints eager for the past, through the vague snow of many clay pipes. And what is in store? Footprints eager for the past, the usual obtuse blanket. And what is in store for those dearest to the king? The usual obtuse blanket of legless regrets and amplifications for those dearest to the king. Yes, sirs, connoisseurs of oblivion. Of legless regrets and amplifications, that is why a watchdog is shy. Yes, sirs, connoisseurs of oblivion. These days are short, brittle, there is only night. That is why a watchdog is shy, why the court trapped in a silver storm is dying. These days are short, brittle, there is only one night, and that soon gotten over. Why the court trapped in a silver storm is dying, some blunt pretense to safety we have, and that soon have gotten over, for they must have motion. Some blunt pretense to safety we have, eyes shining without mystery, for they must have motion through the vague snow of many clay pipes. And what hopefully you caught on there is that he is repeating lines throughout the poem. So the poem, while being consisting of 7 stanzas of 4 lines and 28 lines of poetry, does not actually contain 28 different lines of poetry. He's having the second line of a stanza become the first line of the next stanza, and then he's having the last line of a stanza become the third line of the next stanza. And so by taking these on, he's allowing us. Sorry, I said that. He's having the last line become the third line, and he's having the second line of a stanza become the first line of the next one. And so he takes sort of the lines 2 and 4 and drops them to be lines 1 and 3 in the next stanza, and that creates this like chanting rhythm. But he's also, by juxtaposing those with new lines in between them, he totally changes the meaning of those lines. And so as just a quick contrast, from the first stanza, eyes shining without mystery, footprints eager for the past, through the vague snow of many clay pipes. And what is in store? There's a question there that will be answered in the next stanza with that footprints eager for the past line. But if we go back to the last stanza, some blunt pretense to safety we have, eyes shining without mystery, for they must have motion through the vague snow of many clay pipes. And there we take the idea, the very first line of the poem is actually being almost mocked as a blunt pretense to safety, and the entire poem is being mocked. Our sensibility of what the poem means is constantly being forced to shift. And so Ashbery there, he's playing with a form of repetition, something that goes back, honestly, centuries and centuries. That this was something that singers were doing and balladeers were doing and troubadours. But he's also, by doing that, by changing the lines as well, he's not just creating this pseudo refrain, he's also forcing us to examine how the language changes within that context. And that's something that Ashbery constantly obsesses over, is how the precision of his language can be shifted so subtly. It's almost as if everything is balanced and he just adds a single grain of sand to the balance and lets it tip, and we have to tip with it as readers. I want to read another example. This one is a more esoteric, strange one. Answering a question in the mountains. I went into the mountains to interest myself in the fabulous dinners of hosts distant and demure. The foxes followed with endless lights. Some day I am to build the wall of the box in which all angles are shown. I shall bounce like a ball. The towers of justice are waving to describe the angles we describe. Oh, we have been so far to instruct the birds in our cold ways. Near me I hear a sound, the line of a match struck in care. It is late to be late. Let us ascend the hearts in our hearts. Let us ascend trees in our heads, the dull heads of trees. It is pain in the hand of the ungodly to witness all the centuries, the perfumed toque of dawn, the hysteric evening with empty hands. The snow creeps by, many light years pass. We see for the first time, we shall see for the first time, we have seen for the first time. The snow creeps by, many light years past. I cannot agree or seek, since I departed in the laugh of diamonds, the hosts of my young days. There's so much to unpack within that one, and I won't, but I would encourage you to search out John Ashbery, to see some of his writing, to see how he veers between these modes so fluidly, so quickly. He has collections that are much more contained and focused and explore a theme and really work it through. But he really is also at his best, he and finest. He's constantly pushing himself in new directions. He's stretching himself as a poet and trying to encompass so many different experiences, so many different meanings. And while in that poem we saw images that just work. I departed in the laugh of diamonds. The perfumed toque of dawn, the hysteric evening with empty hands. And then he includes those with those tiny chants of the repeating the word within the same line to describe the angles we describe, or let us ascend the hearts in our hearts. He does that. He has in the section 2, he has the 3-line refrain of we see for the first time, we shall see for the first time, we have seen for the first time, and that with the many light years pass on and the snow creeping by on either side. He's doing so many different things within this poem, answering a question in the mountains, and yet he is much more enigmatic. He is much more inscrutable in this example than in some of those other earlier ones. And so I want to close with The Painter. And I won't read the full thing, but I'll read a couple of parts in it. Sitting between the sea and the buildings, he enjoys painting the sea's portrait. But just as children imagined a prayer is merely silence, he expected his subject to rush up the sand and, seizing a brush, plaster its own portrait on the canvas. Wonderful. So there was never any paint on his canvas until the people who lived in the buildings put him to work. Try using the brush as a means to an end. Select for a portrait something less angry and large and more subject to a painter's moods, or perhaps to a prayer. How could he explain to them his prayer, that nature, not art, might usurp the canvas? He chose his wife for a new subject, making her vast like ruined buildings, as if forgetting itself, the portrait had expressed itself without a brush. And he dips his brush in the sea. And then the fifth stanza, imagine a painter crucified by his subject, too exhausted even to lift his brush. He provoked some artist leaning from the buildings to malicious mirth. We haven't a prayer now of putting ourselves on canvas or getting the sea to sit for a portrait. And so then the denouement of the poem is him being cast down from the building. And the sea devours the canvas and the brush, as though his subject had decided to remain a prayer. This idea of silence. And there's something in there of Ashbery as the painter, as the poet, as the artist. But there's again this force, this intrusion and collision of his images and his language and humanity, and the way those are constantly intersecting. The different, if those are three sides of a triangle, the different triangles he forms from those, I think really work, and they make his poems worth reading, worth rereading, and you can almost binge read Ashbery because there are going to be so many different experiences within them. So let me know if you're a fan of Ashbery, if you have read any of his other works. I know there's a Convex mirror, and some others that are probably more popular, but I would say Some Trees is a very solid collection. In terms of quick references, in terms of form, there's something about Ashbery where he harks back to sort of the Augustan poets, the Restoration poets, the 17th to 18th century. This idea that there's this precision of language, that someone like Dryden perhaps, where he's pushing at that and trying to really drill down. The book had been selected by Ayden for the Yale Young Poets collection, and Ayden famously had his book of light verse a couple of decades earlier, where he wanted to look at not at the serious poems, but at different comic and lighter poems and see how those had changed over centuries in English poetry. And then someone who's roughly contemporary to Ashbery, a little bit younger, would be May Swenson, and I'll link my videos on her poetry in the description box, because she's someone who also is playing with form, much more than her examination with rhyme or poetry or something like that. The structure and form of the poetry is what really interests her, and the way that she is able to fuse her very personal experiences growing up in very rural locations, being queer, that sort of links her with Ashbery and his very urban and sort of more patrician experiences that he expresses in his poetry. But there is an incredible gift that each had. So I hope everyone's doing well. Thank you.